Yeah. So back to my original question, Mark. So how does this end? Do these countries have an elegant way of somehow getting out of this, or, and I'm going to use an extreme example here. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but does it go more the Sri Lankan route, where just it gets to a point where everybody doesn't have an option except rising up against who's running the country because it's just not working for them anymore?
Well, Sri Lanka has one problem. It's not the US. They can't print their money without right away feeling consequences.
Yeah.
The US still has the reserve currency, but that will come to an end, in my view. I don't know when, but it will come to an end. That we should all know. But I think the easy option is what the Fed has enabled: print money, deficits.
Which, of course,
will end one day. It will end one day. But for now, as I said, in Turkey, the country functions perfectly well with 80% inflation.
Right, but you have said it's lit the fuse, right? You know that it can't do that forever.
No, it won't last forever. I think we are in for a period. The generation born just at the end of the Second World War up to now, they were too young essentially to go into the Vietnam War, or most of them, and they experienced in Europe and in the US unprecedented increase in wealth among peace. There was the Cold War, but they didn't shoot at each other, and so forth. And the Chinese opened up in 1978. After 1990, the country took off like a rocket. And in India, as soon as they gave up the policies of isolation and socialism, the country boomed by about 8% growth per annum for the last 30 years. We have to see this. The capitalistic system, as soon as it was adopted in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Eastern Europe overall, and in Latin America, and in India and Pakistan and so forth, and in China, Vietnam, led to very strong growth. This is a period unique in history, and we are destroying ourselves. There was just an article the other day in the Wall Street Journal that now actually in the Spectator. It's a very good paper because they are journalists that think something. Anyway, the article referred to Jefferson, the Constitution, and how, as a society, we created newer and newer problems.
Well, a lot of people think that, that is the legacy of government, and the more government you have, the more problems it creates, right?
Yeah, of course. And the government has to expand to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy.
So, gosh, there's so many places I could take that, but let me zero in on this. There's been a lot of talk lately about the BRICS countries really coming together, and even more swiftly in the wake of the Ukraine war, given how the West went to has iced out the Russians, and so the Russians are kind of cementing their own relationships. There's a lot of talk about a BRICS currency that's in the works, and it's going to be a basket of commodities, but it's going to be priced in gold grams. From your vantage point, how real is all of that?
Well, the reality is that every reserve currency, whether it was the pound or the Mexican peso and so forth, eventually they disappeared. Will it be a currency of BRICS countries? Who knows? Because the BRICS countries don't trust each other.
Yeah, and that is a good point that a lot of people ignore. Yeah,
but I think it could be a currency based on crypto technology, or it could be a currency based on gold. I think this is the most likely outcome, that is based on a certain quantity of gold and silver on a hard asset. But how soon this will happen? I mean, if you ask any Indonesian, Pakistani, Indian, Chinese, and so forth, you go to their countries and you tell them, oh, you're a successful businessman and so forth. And, you know, you have an account overseas, I can manage it and so forth. All these people, they hold assets in US dollars, all of them. That is the reality. And until I can go to a wealthy Indonesian family or a wealthy Malaysian or Thai family and say, look, you should invest in this BRICS currency and so forth, it will take a lot of persuasion until they do it. If I go to them and say, you should invest some of your money in gold, that they will do. But they will also say, well, gold, you know, is not a good investment. We make much more in our stock market, and the stock market is depressed and so forth and so on. Nowadays, these people are quite sophisticated. They know that this is a big difference of the last 50 years. You see, 50 years ago, when the British Empire collapsed after the Second World War, the American Empire developed. Most people around the world, except for Europe, were uneducated economically and monetary-wise. You know, the lots of billionaires in Hong Kong, they started out as coolies. That's amazing. Nothing at all. Sam Walton wasn't an educated person either. So this is a world where now the children have had education and so forth. They know very well, and they also read the papers and the news and the social media, and they know that the world is not divided between the good US and the evil empire, Russia and China and evil India and all these big countries.
All right. Well, look.
When I grew up, we all believed in the US. We all admired the US as children in Europe because the US had made a major contribution in essentially defeating the Germans.
Right. And what's important here, I just want to give you a chance to underscore this, is there are some people that listen to comments you make and other people like you make of, oh, the central banks are going to keep printing and the West is in decline. And they think, okay, therefore our currency is going to be worth nothing tomorrow. And there's going to be a new reserve currency and it's going to be the BRICS. What I hear you saying is yes, that may be the long-term trajectory, but you to be practical, it takes a long time for habits and opinions and sentiment to shift. And it's not like the world is going to give up on the dollar right now. And to your point, very tellingly, you go to most countries and say, okay, I'll give you an equivalent amount in either US dollars or in your local currency. In most cases, people say, well, I'll definitely take the dollars, right? And that's not going to be given up overnight.
I don't think so. And number two, you also have to look. I can have a deposit I can buy a 10 years a Japanese bond. It yields 0.5%. In the US, I buy a 10 years, it yields 4%. I mean, close to 4%. So why not invest in US dollars for the next 10 years? Now, if you told me you can invest in US dollars for the next 10 years or in gold, I would choose gold. No question about this.
Okay, and just elaborate on it for the viewer here.
Well, I mean, I think whatever happens, say we have a scenario of deflation. Deflation, everything collapses, your wages, my wages, our houses collapse, everything. It is a complete calamity. Then I'm rather be in gold than in dollars because the dollar obligations will not be paid. If the real estate prices in America drop 30%, the massive bankruptcies.
Yep.
And it may happen in commercial. The vacancy rate in New York is now among commercial buildings 22%.
Wow.
22%. we live in a world which is very interesting because for the last 200 years, the trend is urbanization. Now, I sit in Chiang Mai, I talk to you, I have Bloomberg on my computer. It was difficult to install it. And then you can live anywhere. If I were young and I was so-called, how do they call them? The migrant workers or whatever. Then I would go and live in a small village in Italy. It's almost free of charge. You can buy properties for nothing in the countryside.
I've heard that literally like $1. I mean, you're signing up for a lot of repairs, but yes.
Yes, but if you are manually halfway normal, in other words, you had a hammer once a while in your hand. Well, Americans with their foreign policy is always the hammer. So they should be used to it. They can rebuild the house.